Good afternoon. My name is Trey Hull. I'm one of the researchers at the St. Louis University Billiken Bee Lab, and we're getting ready to get started with our second episode of the Billiken Bee Lab educational talks. For any of the participants that are out there, go ahead and hang on with us. We're going to give everybody else a little bit more time to get logged in, and we'll get started. Thank you. All right, for anybody who's currently logged in, if you want to go ahead and start, you can post any questions to the chat board that we can answer during the show, or if it's anything that you're curious in general about mosquitoes or digital mapping or geographical information sciences, I can answer those while we're waiting for everybody else to log in. We're going to give everybody about 2.5 more minutes, and then we'll get started from then. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Well, like I said, my name is Trey Hull. I am a graduate student at University in Dr. Gerardo Camilo's Billiken Bee Lab. But I actually don't study bees. I study something a little bit different. I study mosquitoes, and more specifically, how the environment that you live in can help mosquitoes or stop mosquitoes from being around you and keep you healthy and keep you safe. So I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk about what a mosquito is. I think there's a little bit of there's some information out there, and I know a lot of people have a lot of questions. So we'll talk about that. Mosquitoes are actually a type of fly. They're in the family Diptera, and um, actually in the Clusidae. They're in the order Diptera, in the family Clusidae, which actually means gnat. It's an old it's derived from a Latin term that means gnat, which kind of makes a little bit of sense if you think about it. They're small fly, which is where the term mosquito comes from. Actually, it's Spanish for little fly. And if we think about gnats, those little biting flies, kind of makes sense why they would call them that. And then they're actually broken down to a lot of different species of mosquito, and scientists estimate that there's somewhere between 2,700, that's 2,700 species, and 3,500 species. It kind of depends on how you break them down by name and subfamily. There are different types of mosquitoes and different mosquitoes for different areas, and just as many different ways of mosquito living as there are for ways that people live, different types of people. Mosquitoes that they eat, and how long they live, and the way their life kind of progresses. Now, when I say the types of things that they eat, you may be surprised to find that not all mosquitoes drink blood, and in fact, only half of the mosquitoes in the world drink blood. And can I get anybody out there have any guesses as to which half of the mosquitoes that drink blood? Well, if any of you out there said the female mosquitoes, that's right. It's only the girls in the species that drink blood, and they don't actually drink the blood for nourishment or for food. They use the blood to make their eggs, and that's why only the girls in the species drink the blood. They actually drink nectar or liquid sugar from plants to get their nutrients. And that's what they eat to stay healthy and to have energy. The blood, like I said, is just for the making eggs. So of those, we'll say conservatively 2,700 species of mosquito out there. About 176 of those species live in the United States. And if you're in the area, you look in kind of what year, their range changes from year to year. But we have a very interesting kind of quality to the area where I live in Missouri, that we're actually capable of hosting all 176 types of species in this area. At least our weather and the types of water and different types of environments we have here would meet the criteria needed for all of those species. That's not to say that we have all of them here, but it's kind of interesting that we do. Now, with those differences and changes in the types of mosquitoes, another interesting thing is that not all mosquitoes can make you sick. We do know that one of the biggest, one of the reasons why mosquitoes are so important and why we pay attention to mosquitoes, and one of the reasons why I study mosquitoes, is that a lot of them can. Unfortunately for them, because they're not viruses or bacteria, or from what I'm gonna call from now on, illnesses. They're not illnesses of the mosquito. They're not things that the mosquito has. They're actually illnesses of the animals that the mosquitoes feed on, including ourselves. You can think of the mosquitoes as like a disease Uber. They're really just transporting the diseases, and they don't even really know that they're doing it, with some exceptions. There are a few disease period. So in some cases, it's most likely that mosquitoes are just as, if not more so, affected by these diseases as we are. But like I said, not all mosquitoes carry diseases. Again, only the female mosquitoes will carry diseases, and those are the ones that bite you. So that's the one that are most important for carrying disease. Those are the Aedes, Anopheles, and Culex species. carry diseases. And although there are a few other species that do, those are the ones that carry the diseases that we're most concerned about. Your diseases like malaria, West Nile virus, and actually there's one that's named after where I study, which I'm not sure if that's something that I'm proud of, or if it's more infamous. But there's the St. Louis encephalitis virus, which I'm concerned with, and they're all actually pretty different and pretty interesting in different ways, because they all live in different environments and they all have very specific and different needs. Starting with the one that's most studied, and most of those mosquitoes are the ones that carry malaria. And those mosquitoes prefer a transient water source, or water that comes and goes, like flood water and rainwater, and shallow standing water. Some of those mosquitoes can even breed in salt water. Additionally, those mosquitoes are found usually more in tropical environments, and were, until recent history, found in the southern United States and the northern Mexico. However, since mid-century, we, for the most part, eradicated the concern for malaria in the United States. Those are the Anopheles mosquitoes are the ones that you hear most often about in Central and Southern Africa, Asia, and Central America. Next, a little bit more close to home, a second concern would be the Aedes species mosquitoes. The Aedes are also found in Asia, Africa, Central America, but also in the United States as well. We have them in the southeastern states. We actually have them in all the southern states, including our southwestern states. And those species carry other diseases that can make us sick. Some of the ones that we've heard most, what I've been spending most of my time studying recently, which we have in Central and Northern America, as well as in several parts of Europe and Asia, is the Culex species mosquito. And they, again, also can make people sick, but prefer whereas the Anopheles species prefer that, like I said, that water that comes and goes, like flood waters and shallow waters. The Aedes species that we just talked about, they prefer what we call container waters or whole waters. They like small little amounts of water. The Aedes species likes a cleaner water. The Culex species likes what we call a dirty water. They're a standing water species that doesn't really care of the quality of the water. It can be as dirty as several leaves and logs and dirt system, or in water that you would find in a garbage can. So, and like I said, that kind of gives you an idea of the different environments that we see the mosquitoes live in, and the differences between those mosquitoes. Now, why the water is important, and why you hear mosquitoes' environments most often discussed in the types of water that they prefer, is because that is actually where the female lay multiple broods per season, depending on the health and the kind of the luck of the female mosquito as to whether or not she's eaten in her lifetime, or if she lives to what mosquito would be considered old age. They can lay several broods. The mosquitoes can lay upwards of 300 eggs per brood, which is pretty impressive if you think about having to give birth to 300 kids at one time. But they get around that the stress of giving birth like humans do by laying eggs like mosquitoes do, or anything close to that. What can you throw? Go ahead and type into the comments any animals that you can think of that would also lay eggs like that. Well, if you're staying at home, there's lots of different animals. You're absolutely correct. It's a very common way to have kids, and it's a good way to have a bunch of kids because you don't have to deal with them right away. You can lay them and then either let them mature on their own, which is what mosquitoes do, or then you can lay them and then gather more resources and be ready to feed them when they hatch. Now, mosquitoes do a similar thing. They go through they hatch from the egg, and then they are a larva, and then they pupate into they go through several stages of larva, and then they become pupas. And once they're a pupa, they kind of finish growing. And then once from a pupa, they emerge from that state, similar to what you would see a caterpillar like turn into a butterfly. They kind of go a little bit dormant in their pupal shell, and then they emerge from their pupal shell into adult mosquitoes. And then like I said, that can take up to 7 days depending on the weather. But from there, as you can imagine, if a female mosquito can lay 300 eggs and then 7 days later, very quickly, which is why we call them, if they're a mosquito that can carry a disease, it's why they're an insect or a vector of public health importance. And a vector is an animal or bug, which bugs are still animals, that can carry a disease from one species to another or among a species. So this different life cycle of mosquitoes plays a big role into why I research them and why they're very important to biology, and why they're important to public health, and why it's important to pay attention to them and to research them. From their life cycle, we know that their environment is very important, and it makes a big role. And that's kind of what I study. Is I look at the different types of environment and how those different environments and the qualities of those environments can affect how fast mosquitoes, how fast mosquito populations can grow, how many mosquitoes can live in that area, what types of mosquitoes can live in that area. We talked about the different types of water they like, and the different places they like to lay their eggs. And it's also important to know the temperature of where you're at. And one of the ways that I study this is by using what we call a geographical information system, and sometimes referred to as geographical information sciences, but commonly referred to both as GIS. And what those are is actually computerized maps, or using different types of computer systems, not just necessarily maps, but different types of computer systems connected together that will actually help you visualize and help you map out where different things are. And it just gives you a different way of looking at things. A really good example that a lot of us have seen recently is if we've seen some of the maps that are on the news of where different people or different groups of people have been sick, or if we've seen the maps that we often use to get from place to place, like Google Maps or Yahoo Maps. Those are great examples of GISs. And what those are is using different technologies and different information brought together into one map that helps you see different things and visualize the information that you need to know. With the case of the maps of the different areas where people are sick and how many people are sick, it shows us the United States, and then on top of that, we can see by representation of the size of circles, the different amount of people that are sick in that area. And that's very helpful for scientists and researchers and public health officials, as well as kind of everybody, to get a better idea of information. Because if we took that information and I just wrote the numbers down for you and the places, it wouldn't be as helpful, because maybe you don't know where those places are. Maybe it's not really, it's kind of hard to understand the difference between certain numbers when you get at a certain scale. If you're looking at thousands of numbers, maybe is 2,000 really that much different from 3,000? And in different cases it is, in some cases it's not. So what these GISs do is they help people get a better idea of the significance or the importance of different amounts and different things compared to others. There's other things that it can be used for. One of the other things that I use GIS for in my research is looking at satellite data and imagery from satellite, and I use the technology from GIS to help me visualize that data and compare it to itself. And this is very helpful because a lot of times it's information or numbers that are too big for me to work with on a calculator or work with in a spreadsheet, that I can separate by area and I can separate by different qualities, and then it makes it a lot easier for me to use. And then I can look at the different areas in which the information that I'm concerned with occur, and the different area and how they differ from other areas. So to bring it back to mosquitoes, one of the things that I would like to be doing, I plan to do with my research, either this summer or next summer, is to look at how mosquitoes in different areas, if you live in the city or if you live just outside the city, or maybe you live out in the country in a more rural setting, look at how those different areas affect whether or not you have mosquitoes that can make you sick, and if the area that you live in, if your backyard in that area has more wildlife and more native plants, if that can also assist in the types of mosquitoes that you have, or help you bring in other types of animals that can reduce your risk of getting sick from those mosquitoes. I would like to do this, or will do this, by going in and collecting different mosquitoes from backyards across the greater St. Louis area, and we're gonna collect those mosquitoes and also look at the different types of wildlife that people have in their backyards. One of the things that I'm really interested in is looking at the different types of birds and looking to see if the variety of birds that you have, if how many types of birds you have affects the different affects your risk for mosquito-borne disease, and I'm measuring that risk by looking at the different types of mosquitoes you have, and if you have more mosquitoes that can make you sick. Like I said, more of those Culex species mosquitoes. So I'd like to take. We're getting close to the halfway point of our video stream today. I'd like to take the time to field any questions that anybody might have. If anybody out there would like to put in the chat window any questions that you have at this point, or about mosquitoes or GIS or my research or science in general, I'd be happy to answer your question. So I got a question from Nina. It says, "Hi Trey, what time of year do mosquitoes come out?" So that's a great question. Thank you for asking, Nina. Well, mosquitoes are they're early. They come out in early spring, depending on the type of mosquito or the species of mosquito. Mosquitoes can come out as early as late March, and they can stay as long as October. So really, as it warms up, the mosquitoes will start coming out, and as it gets cold, they'll kind of go back away. That's a great question. Thank you for asking. Oh, Rachel, that's a great question. Thank you. So Rachel asks, how many types of mosquitoes are there? That is a very good question, and we're still learning. We actually don't know. I said a little bit earlier, and I'd like to say it again for anybody who's joined us since then. So scientists are currently estimating between 2,700 and 3,500 species of mosquito, kind of depending on how you what category of mosquito is. Some of the mosquitoes, some people consider them a subspecies, whereas other people consider them their own species. But generally, most scientists agree that we have discovered 2,700 species of mosquito. And Alan asks if there are any free resources or ways for us to look at cool maps. Absolutely. Um, one of my favorite things to do is I actually I Google cool maps and go to images, which may be a bit broad, but if there's something that you're interested in, I can almost guarantee that there is a really cool map about it. And I recommend anybody just taking some time and finding something that's something that they're very interested in, and doing a quick Google search on free map or on maps of that subject. Something that might be a little bit more structured. You can go to the Esri website, which is a company that produces GIS software, and you can go to Esri's Map of the Day, as well as MIT hosts a Map of the Week contest where you can submit cool maps that you've made, and they will judge them on their kind of the different qualities of a map, if it's, how clear it is, how useful it is, things like that. And then once a week they'll pick a winner. Oh, Jenny, that's a great question. So Jenny asks, what area of the world has the most types of mosquitoes? Hmm. Uh, that is a very good question. The majority of the mosquito species that are known do come from the African continent, um, but I don't know if they have the most. As far as individual species, um, or distinct species, the African continent does have the most diversity of mosquitoes, but the Asian continent has a very large number as well. Nina asks a follow-up question: are mosquitoes pollinators? Uh, that's a great question. There is some debate on whether or not mosquitoes are pollinators, but the question should really be: are mosquitoes good pollinators? Well, because they are most definitely pollinators. They are definitely able to transfer pollen from plants to other plants just simply by the fact that they eat pollen. Um, but there's some question as to whether or not they're doing it on purpose, and if there's any actual relationship between mosquitoes and the plants, or if they're kind of just what we call pollen thieves. Is climate change affecting mosquitoes? Thank you, Rachel. That's an excellent question. Um, Short answer, yes, absolutely. So, as we talked about before, the environment in which mosquitoes live is very important. And the types of water that they need is very important. Now, like we discussed, some of the mosquitoes prefer rainwater and floodwaters. And as we've seen in recent years, that climate change has changed the rain patterns and changed our climate patterns, because it is climate change. And that has shown itself to be very, very important for rainfall and the amount of rain that areas are getting, especially areas that usually get a good bit of rain now seem to be getting a lot more. So if you can imagine mosquitoes that prefer to live in areas that get rainfall, so they're going to live in those areas. And now if those areas are getting more rain and the mosquitoes have more places to lay eggs, they're going to be able to lay eggs faster and more. And areas that didn't previously get as much rain, those mosquitoes are going to move into those areas as well. Additionally, as our seasons shift and we seem to be having longer summers, that means, like we said, when it warms up, the mosquitoes come out and they don't go away until it gets cold again. Then, if the summers continue to last longer, then we're going to have mosquitoes out for more time, which means more ability for the mosquitoes to possibly infect people and make more people sick. So, as a short answer, absolutely, Rachel, yes. The current research does indicate that climate change is affecting mosquitoes. And from their point of view, it seems to be affecting them positively, but maybe negatively for us. All right. Well, we'll take some time again here in a little bit to answer more questions. Um, you know what? I'm going to answer. We got we got one more question in there late. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to answer that real quick, and then we'll get back into talking about some more mosquitoes and map stuff. So Jenny asks, are mosquitoes really attracted to certain types of people or certain types of clothing? And I'm sorry to say, Jenny, yes, they are. So if you have ever noticed that maybe you're outside with somebody else, maybe a significant other or a friend, and they just seem to ignore that other person and primarily attack you. I'd like to tell you that in this specific instance, you are not crazy. That is real. So there's some research out that has shown that mosquitoes are attracted to the gases that are given off by the bacteria that live in our skin. And if you have bacteria that lives on your skin that gives off a certain type of gas that's more appealing to the mosquitoes, then the person that you're with, they will focus more on you and tend to ignore the other person. Um, there are also some other interesting qualities about your diet or your physical body that can change your attractiveness to mosquitoes. Interestingly enough, there is some evidence to show that your blood type can affect your attractiveness to mosquitoes. Although that hasn't, they're still testing to figure out whether or not that's the reason for that, or if there's not another reason that's making that seem so. So they're still trying to figure out what that reason is. But early evidence did support that. Also, pregnancy. The hormones that women give off while they're pregnant, as well as their increased blood supply, does make them more attractive to mosquitoes. And their weakened immune system actually makes them at greater risk for mosquito-borne diseases, as well as for clothing. So mosquitoes are attracted to differences in color. We're not sure. We do know they can see certain colors. We're not sure which colors they can see, but we know that more importantly, besides colors, mosquitoes can see the differences in colors. So the more drastic the difference is, the better they can see it. And then also, we believe that the darker the color is, or the lighter the color is, the more it stands out from the things around it, and the better the mosquito can see it. Also, body temperature is very important. The warmer you are, the easier it is for the mosquito to find you, as well as the higher your heart rate. So people that move around more or are more active for two reasons. It gets your blood circulating, which when your blood circulates, you have more blood at the surface of your skin, which increases your body surface temperature. Which, like I said, the warmer you are, the faster the easier the mosquitoes can find you, as well as the more you move. We know the more and longer we move, the more we tend to sweat. And that kind of goes back into what we were talking about before with the bacteria on your skin. Mosquitoes are able to sense different chemicals in our sweat. They can actually smell it and taste it from the air, similar to how a shark can smell blood and water. They smell our sweat and air, and it keys them into us. And the more you're sweating, the more they eat more easily they can find you. So yes, absolutely, Jenny. There are different things, and there are many other qualities as well that mosquitoes key into when looking for something to feed on. Which actually is a great segue. Let's talk about that. The ways that we can protect ourselves from mosquitoes, and the ways that mosquitoes kind of get around those ways that we protect us. So there are kind of three levels of ways that we can protect ourselves from mosquitoes. The first one is the most protective and the best way to protect yourself, and absolutely the least fun, is to not go where mosquitoes are and to stay indoors where there are no mosquitoes. That, as many of us are finding out right now, especially in the states like Missouri that have asked people to stay home to be safe, staying indoors all the time maybe isn't as much fun as we may like to believe. And we do miss out on a lot of the really amazing things out in nature and outside that we all love doing and seeing. But it is the most absolutely protective thing that we can do to keep to keep us safe from those mosquitoes. Second is to cover up anything any exposed skin that a mosquito can feed on. There are two areas that we found that mosquitoes prefer to feed off of, which is really odd. Is there anybody that can guess what those two areas are? Well, if you said hands and feet, you are absolutely correct. Researchers are still trying to figure out why, but it seems the sweat that comes from the soles of our feet and basically from our ankles and lower, and from our wrists and lower, is more attractive to mosquitoes. We do know that the sweat that comes from the soles of feet and our palm from our hands is different from the sweat from the rest of their body. We're just not sure what it is about that difference that mosquitoes prefer. So, covering up the skin and the sweat that attracts mosquitoes is the second most protective thing that we can do to keep ourselves safe from them. This serves to one, like I said, it can mask that scent of the sweat. It can block the way they see our body temperature, and it can mask our body temperature. And it most importantly it reduces their access to our skin, because if it's covered up and they can't get to it, they can't bite us. So covering yourself up is the second most protective thing that you can do to keep yourself safe from mosquitoes, as well as a lot of other insects that bite you or want to drink your blood. The third most protective thing you can do is wear a improved insect repellent, something like DEET or permethrin, and the CDC guide. You can go to the CDC website for mosquitoes or vector-borne disease, and they have a very nice list of approved products beyond DEET or permethrin if you're looking for an alternative. And they will they have very good specifics on the concentrations of those chemicals that you can buy, because you may have noticed when you go to stores and you look at DEET, it comes in different percentages of use. The CDC recommends percentages less than 70 and greater than 30%. There's some really good information as to why and what those differences are on the CDC website. That is the third thing you can use is an approved insect repellent. Now, if you're going to go with the third option, which is the most common and what most health professionals will recommend, because it doesn't restrict your enjoyment of the outdoors, as well as it doesn't increase your risk of overdressing for the outdoors, even though that is technically more protective than the insect repellent. So, say if you're going to be enjoying a nice barbecue out in your backyard during the summer or the late spring, and you've been getting a little bit annoyed by some of the mosquitoes out there, you don't necessarily need to go in and put on long trousers and a long shirt, and a cap and goggles and gloves to enjoy your barbecue, because that might be a little bit too much. It might be more reasonable to just go ahead and apply some insect repellent, and continue enjoying your barbecue. Some important things to remember with that insect repellent, though, is it's not a one and done thing. You don't apply and forget. Once you've applied the insect repellent, it's important to follow the guidelines for the company that makes the repellent, and how often you should reapply, and where that repellent should go, and most importantly, read the instructions on the repellent that you're using and make sure that it's safe for everybody that you're using it on. Some repellents aren't safe to use on children of certain ages, and there are definitely some areas of your body that you don't want to put repellent on, including your eyes. So once you've put the repellent on, what do you do? Well, like I said about it. The more you're going to be running around, the more you're going to be doing, the more you're going to be sweating, like we talked about. And we know that mosquitoes are attracted to your sweat. So as you begin to sweat, and the more time that you're out in the sun with the mosquitoes, you want to make sure that you're reapplying that mosquito repellent, and make sure that especially if you notice that the mosquitoes are starting to come and be a little bit more interested in you, it's usually a pretty good cue that it's time to change or to reapply. Secondly, like I said, make sure that you're applying a CDC approved type of repellent, and make sure that you're applying the repellent correctly and to the right people. Now let's talk about how repellent works, and this is a really interesting topic, and one of the things that I'm very interested in, just personally, because we don't know. We actually don't know how repellent works. We know that it does work, and we do know that if you're using a CDC approved repellent in the way that they're meant to be used, they're very safe, and they're perfectly okay to use in the manner that's described by the people who make them. But we don't actually know why they work. There's been some recent research to kind of figure that out. Originally, especially with DEET, a cool story about DEET is that during World War II, we were having a lot of problems with mosquitoes and mosquito illness with a lot of the soldiers and the Marines, and they so the U.S. government decided, hey, I need help from the chemical manufacturing companies to create something that can keep our service members safe. And so they all got together, and they got all the chemicals they had and all the chemists they could, and they started making different types of different formulations of chemicals that they knew they could put together safely, and found the combinations that were most repellent to mosquitoes. And that was the formulation of DEET that we currently use. And so we know that the mosquitoes didn't like it at all, and it was thought that formulation of DEET, they didn't like the smell of it, so they stayed away from it. But actually, now the more research has shown that it actually masks our smell, so it confuses them, and they have more trouble finding. They have trouble finding a food source and finding us to feed off of. Some of the research has shown that, much like butterflies, mosquitoes can smell and taste with their feet, as well as their antennas. And we think that when mosquitoes land on our skin, they're looking for the smell of our blood underneath our skin, and that the DEET blocks their ability to smell our blood, so they're not sure where to poke their what we call proboscis, the needle that comes off of their face, and they don't know where to bite us at, so they just get frustrated and fly away. But hopefully in future research, I know there's a lot of good work out there being done now trying to work on this problem. We'll get a better understanding of exactly how those repellents work and why, and we'll be able to make more effective repellents and ways of protecting ourselves from mosquitoes. So we are just now at the 15 minutes to go mark, so I would like to take a little bit more time to answer questions, and kind of transition from mosquitoes into a little bit more talk about maps, and then we will go from there. So if there's any questions out there about, if there's any other burning questions about mosquitoes, or if anybody has questions about the GIS, again, that's the Geographical Information Systems or Geographical Information Sciences, the digital maps that we make or that people can make, I'd be happy to answer those. Or if there's any questions about science in general, I'd be more than happy to answer those to the best of my ability. Okay. Well, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and put them into the comment box, into the chat, and I'll keep answering them as they come in. All right. So transitioning a little bit from mosquitoes into geographical information systems and maps. As we talked about a little bit before, geographical information sciences or geographical information systems, GISs, are an amazing way to visualize science, and they're an amazing way to kind of represent things that aren't necessarily easy to represent on a spreadsheet or just in a graph or in a picture. And it gives you really good information about the landscape in which you live in, which is what I'm interested in. but a little bit more interesting than just flat maps. One of the cool new technologies that's been coming out recently is three-dimensional maps and virtual maps. And although my research doesn't focus on these, I'm very interested in them, and I believe there's a lot of really good work that's coming out from them. Is we're developing these much like 3D pictures and 3D objects. These are three-dimensional maps that can visualize actual depth in space and reconstruct entire city landscapes just from similar to the way we would with two-dimensional flat maps. We can represent different things on these three-dimensional maps, and virtual maps are there's some work being done on virtual maps currently, or which will give people the opportunity to actually explore maps much in the way we would explore a building or explore a city, and to interact with the map directly by changing aspects or accessing and expanding on concepts within the map. That capability is currently available in things like story maps or interactive maps, like what we see on a lot of websites. But the virtual aspect, I think, is a really interesting kind of format that really will get the most out of that interactive nature of a lot of these current maps. Can anybody give me any examples or any ideas that they think would be a great idea for maps, or something that they think maps would be really useful in depicting? Oh, Alan, that's a great question. Yeah, so yeah, that is an amazing way to use maps. So Alan asks, we take so many pictures of the Earth with satellites each day. How do we process all those images? So yeah, that's a great question. Yes, thank you. I did want to bring that up, Alan. So yes, so we have all these satellites that circle the Earth every day, and a lot of those satellites have a lot of purposes that help us communicate and transfer information. But a lot of those satellites, their purpose is simply to take pictures and measurements of different parts of the Earth for different reasons. And so a lot of that satellite data, like I talked about earlier, can be pulled into GIS systems for free. A lot of it's freely available from Earth or the USGS, the U.S. Geological Services. U.S. Geological Services. And that data can be downloaded and incorporated into a GIS and displayed. So a lot of that data actually shows different things, like the temperature of the Earth, the amount of rain that has fallen in the time period of the collection. It can show the growth of fields and the extent of wildfires. And a lot of that data is processed by scientists such as myself to explore how these things have changed or ways that we can prevent those. One of the things that I'm currently working on a side project is how we can use that satellite data and GIS to help stop poachers. For all of you out there that are maybe aware, maybe not, poaching is the illegal capture or killing of animals for many different reasons. It's primarily used for economic reasons. A lot of people are catching or killing these animals to sell for their meats or their horns or tusks or scales. This is most commonly kind of commonly thought of as the catching of elephants or rhinoceri or tigers. But also a lot of other animals, wild birds and monkeys and pangolins, and that's pangolins, not penguins. Pangolins are actually the most poached animal on the planet, and they're critically endangered. And one of the things that I'm working on with some other researchers is to ways that we can use GIS and artificial intelligence to stop poachers from being able to take animals and help the communities in which the animals live protect themselves and protect the animals. So by using the satellite imagery combined with artificial intelligence and machine learning, we are looking at ways to figure out where the poachers will be and how they're going to get there. Looking at using a lot of different data from the satellites. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, that brings us just about to the end. Um, I do really appreciate all of you joining us today. Thank you very much for allowing me to share my science with you and answer any of the questions that you had. The Billiken Bee Lab here at St. Lucie University is very appreciative of this opportunity, and we hope all of you at home are staying healthy and safe. And we'd like to wish all of you a healthy and happy future. Thank you very much, and have a great day. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Bye.